with the people who have won the award for doing more damage in the history of mankind while making the most money, just head to the beach. I teach at NYU. My second most popular class is on the 4 big platforms, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. I turned it into a video, I got a bunch of views, turned it into a book. My most popular course session is the very last session where I attempt to distill down what I believe are the learnings around some great research around happiness. Kids come back to business school thinking they're there to develop economic security. They're really there to try and develop an arc of satisfaction through their life. And I attempt to distill these best and worst practices down to a series of equations, and I take my 4,500 students through these equations. It's the last course. I was asked to give the final lecture, and this is my final lecture that I give to my students. Turned it into a video. Video got 2 million books, 2 million views. Boom, book, Algebra of Happiness. So the fine print. I have no credibility or domain expertise around this subject. I am not a trained social psychologist. I've done a decent amount of research, probably more research than most people do when writing a book, but I usually am introduced to Scott Galloway when I'm talking about this topic, not as Professor Galloway, because I have not done any peer-reviewed primary research. So with that, let's bust right into it. There is an arc of happiness throughout your life, and this is gorgeous research. You very rarely see research that comes back this clean across disparate studies. And what it shows is from about the age of 0 to 25, we're generally pretty happy. This is the era of Disney, universities, Han Solo spilling into adulthood, pure magic. And then from about 25 to about 50, which would cover, I think, probably about 90% of the people in the audience here, this is what I affectionately call the period of your life named shit gets real. And that is, all of a sudden you realize you're not going to have a fragrance named after you, you're likely not going to be a member of parliament. And perhaps the expectations that have been built for you at conferences like this, that you can do anything, and you realize you aren't doing anything that you wanted to do. This isn't the life you would exactly imagine, becomes stressful. The economics, the money wheel gets stressful. Somebody you love gets sick and dies, and life hits you square in the face. And you find that you're stressed out. You find that things are hard and you're not living up to your own expectations. We also have this wonderful competitiveness gene as a species where we naturally anchor off the most successful person across every dimension. We anchor off as our benchmark the best looking person we know, the most successful person we know, the person with the best relationships, and use that as our benchmark, which is great for making the next generation smarter, stronger, and faster, but can create a certain level of anxiety. And then something wonderful happens when you get to around my age, 47. I'm actually 54. And that is you start to get happier. You start to find joy. Remember when you were a kid, you went out and your mom said, look at how beautiful it is here. Look at how wonderful this salad is. And you think, what an idiot. What is she talking about? That will start happening to you. You start finding joy in these things that look, smell, and feel like you, called children. They get less awful as they get older. You start finding joy in nature, in food, in the weather. You start finding relationships are more and more meaningful to you, and you get happier. The cohort that is the happiest is the cohort that should be the least happiest because they're the least healthy, and that's seniors who are generally the happiest cohort across our population.
This is the worst day of my life.
The worst day of your life so far.
So there is an arc. So the lesson here to the kids, and when I say the kids, I mean my students, if you find at 25 or 30 or 35 that you're stressed and quite frankly a little bit disappointed with your life, that is a natural part of the journey. And happiness waits for you. Keep on keeping on. Let's talk about some ratios, some of the algebra I take the kids through. The first is sweating versus watching. The ratio of time you spend sweating to watching other people sweat is a forward-looking indicator of your success. Show me someone that watches sport 2 hours a night and then watches football or soccer all day on Sunday. I'll show you a future of failed relationships and anger. Show me I believe this shit, I'm serious. Show me somebody who works out every day and uses spectator sports as a means of strengthening relationships. I'll show you someone that is good at life. I think spectator sports are the new cancer. Do not let yourself watch sports for any longer than you spend time sweating yourself. This is the ratio. In sum, this is not the slide you're going to see at Cannes. Ad-supported media is pretty strongly inversely correlated to what a loser you are. The more advertising you see, the shittier your life. The one thing that happens among people when they get wealthier and more educated is they start ingesting media that has one thing in common, and that is not polluted by something called advertising. Welcome to Cannes. This is here solely to make me seem more likable. That's my son, love of my life. So what do most Fortune 500 CEOs have in common? Other than they're white males, that's the number one thing. That's 476 out of 500 S&P 500. The other thing they have in common is that they work out almost every day. Exercise is key for antidepressant. It's key for feeling strong. It is very instinctive. I believe you should be able to walk into any room and look around the room and think, I can either kill or outrun anyone in this room. The myth of balance. There's a lot of talk at conferences like this about balance and that you can have it all. How can you have it all? And we put very successful people on stage who are also into kayaking and find time to donate their precious hours at the ASPCA. We all know somebody that has great relationships, is great at what they do, is rich, is good looking, in great shape, and has a food blog. Assume you are not that person. When I query my kids on where they expect to be economically, almost all of them within 10 years not only expect to be in the top decile, they expect to be in the top 1%. And my observation is that if you expect to be in the top decile or the top 1% economically, you are going to do pretty much nothing in your 20s and 30s but work. And I want to be clear, I don't think that's the only path to happiness. A lot of people decide they're not going to get on the money train and they're going to have a lower burn and pursue other means of satisfaction. But the majority of people that I deal with, the majority of people at this conference, if you ask them honestly about where they expect to be professionally and economically, the route there involves work and not much else in your 20s and 30s. I decided very early on, and it's crass to say this, I grew up with no money, I decided that economic security was very important to me. And it was pretty much my sole focus. And the reason why I have balance now is because I had almost none in my 20s and 30s. It cost me my first marriage, it cost me my hair, and it was worth it. But according to Instagram, we don't work a lot. This is what we do according to Instagram. This is our life. I don't even know what she's doing. Okay, the real Instagram, if we were more honest, right? This is the worst advice that is given to people at college universities. At NYU Stern, we have 3 speakers every week, and they're one of 2 things. They're either very interesting or they're billionaires. We have decided in our society that if you amass over $1 billion, that you're incredibly wise and should come speak to young people. This is the worst piece of advice that almost every billionaire gives people when he or she gets in front of a crowd of this size.
After much consideration, I took the less safe path to follow my passion.
Follow your passion. Follow your passion. What bullshit. Oprah followed her passion and became a billionaire. Assume you are not Oprah. Your job is not to find your passion. Your job is to find something you're good at and then invest the requisite thousands of hours practicing it, the perseverance, the grit, the overcoming the obstacles, the bullshit at work, such that you can become great at it. And when you become great at something, the accoutrements of being great at it, economic security, relevance, the respect of your colleagues, a greater selection set of mates. All of these things will make you passionate about whatever it is. Nobody grows up passionate about tax law, but the best tax lawyers in the world fly private and marry people better looking at them, which makes them passionate about tax law. What is the most important decision you will make in terms of your happiness? When I query again my kids on this, they say, the job you pick, the industry you go into, whether the industry is on the upswing or the downswing, where you decide to live, it's none of those things. The most important decision you will make at your age in terms of making the rest of your life happier or less happy is the following. It's not work, it's not your friends, it's who you decide to partner with the rest of your life, specifically who you decide to have kids with. Monogamy pays off economically. People who are in monogamous relationships or find a spouse typically build economic wealth much faster than single people who spend money on stupid shit like trying to look young or drink or go out or be fabulous all the time. That creates friction in your career. It is economically not very advantageous. The worst thing that can take you off track professionally and financially is not health. People think, well, it's a health scare. Most health scares are a function of your age. In your 20s and 30s, you're pretty healthy. The thing that takes more young people off track economically and professionally is, simply put, divorce. It is devastating financially. It typically takes the household emotionally and sets it back a full decade. People say it takes 1 to 2 years to recover. It doesn't. It takes 5 to 10. I have some personal experience with this. My parents were living the American dream. They dropped out of school when they were 13, immigrated from Britain and Scotland. We were living in Laguna Niguel. We pieced together this wonderful middle-class life. My mom was a secretary, my dad a salesman. I was thriving, doing well in Little League and in school, and my dad began his third marriage as he was still in his second marriage. And within about 6 months, we were no longer living on the beach. We were all living in shitty apartments. And emotionally, it probably took us all about 5 to 10 years to get over that. So how do you pick a good partner? And by the way, according to Jeff Bezos, this is his description of divorce. And I don't think divorce is a laughing matter, but when he posted on his Facebook page, I think it's good. It's okay for public consumption. He wrote, and we also see wonderful futures ahead as parents, friends, partners in ventures and projects, and as individuals pursuing ventures and adventures together. I just want to clarify that as someone who's been divorced, this perfectly describes divorce. So what are the keys to a great partnership with someone you're going to have kids with? The first is sex and affection. This says, I choose you, and identifies your relationship as singular. The second is values, syncing up on key things to ensure that you don't have major fissures in the relationship. And then the third thing is money. Passion, values, and money. Romance is key. There's a lot of good research on this. And then shared values. What is the role religion plays in your children's life? Where are you going to live? What's your approach to parenting? How close are we going to live to your parents? What are our expectations for our children? But the number one source of divorce, people usually say it's infidelity. It's not. The number one source of divorce is money. And that is syncing up on your approach to finances. What economic weight class do you and your partner expect to be in, and who is responsible for bringing the money in? And just as importantly, what is each partner's approach to spending money? When people get out of sync on these with respect to their expectations and their values around money, it is the number one source of marital acrimony. Your zip code and your credentials are a forward-looking indicator of your wealth. Give me someone's degree and give me their zip code, and I'll tell you how much money they'll be making by 30. A woman who graduated from Dartmouth and is living in New York or San Francisco or London will be making $150,000 a year by the time she's 30. Someone who dropped out of high school who lives in Little Rock, Arkansas will be lucky if they're making $50,000 a year by the time they're 30. In Europe, we have a caste system. It's your family name. In the US, we have a caste system. We like to think we're a meritocracy in the US. We aren't. We're a caste system. It's called universities. And as a result, academics like myself have become drunk on exclusivity and don't let more kids in such that we can make it harder and harder to get in. In sum, America has fallen out of love with the unremarkable remarkables, and we're making it much harder to get into universities. And as a result, upward income mobility has been stagnant. The majority of wealth is going to be created in 20 to 30 super cities over the course of the next 20 years. Just as when you're playing tennis with someone better than you, your game naturally rises, you want to play tennis with the best in everything, and that is the following: in a city. So the lesson here is pretty straightforward. Move to a city and get credentialed. Now, I realize college isn't right for everyone, but whether it's a Class 3 driver's license or belonging to a union, you need something that digitally says you have some domain expertise in something. And I always like to take this as a moment of gratitude, which again is a key component of happiness. The reason I am on this stage is because of state-sponsored education, full stop. Money and happiness. All the fellow socialists in the room. Money and happiness. Money can't buy you happiness. No, it can. It absolutely can. There's a correlation between money and happiness. Middle-income people are happier than poor people. The affluent are happier than middle-class people. But it tops out. Once you get to a certain point of income security, housing, can take nice vacations and absorb an economic shock, there is no correlation between more money and more happiness. Billionaires are no less happy than millionaires. That's also a myth. According to the study, in an average city in the US, that's around $75,000 to $125,000 a year. I think in cities like this, or London and New York, it's closer to $750,000 a year. Compound interest, the most powerful force in the universe. The idea that if you start putting $250 a month away at the age of 25, you'll have about $900,000. Time goes really fast. If I were to give you a magic box and say, I can give you $1 million if you put $250 a month in there now, and it'll go faster than you think, how much money would you put in it? The people who are the worst at saving are young people, because we naturally assume when we're young that at some point we'll just kill it and millions of dollars will drop from the heavens. Well, maybe that'll happen, but just in case it doesn't, start taking advantage of compound interest. The more interesting analysis around compound interest is compound interest in relationships. And that is when queried about the most important relationship in people's lives, people usually identify the relationship with their mother as singular. And the reason why is your mom likely made these millions of investments from literally day one, these millions of small investments in you. And as a result, that relationship is singular by the time you're older. And I think there's a lesson here. Try to take the time, and it's not a lot of time, to send stupid text messages, little notes, check in with people, say hi, express admiration. These investments are small, and then you wake up and the return with respect to the relationships is immense as you get older. Finding your gorilla. This is the most controversial part of my book, and that is, in America, we have conflated masculinity with toxicity. I think embracing your gender is incredibly rewarding. We've also conflated femininity and weakness in the workplace. And I think that, and there's a lot of research that shows that embracing your masculinity and your femininity is very rewarding. We're having an important discussion around the fact that this is a spectrum, and every person on every point of the spectrum deserves respect, and that's an important conversation. But we somehow seem to have starched out any sort of outward gender appreciation. So the key is, and I speak at this through the lens of a male, and I have a cottage industry coaching the sons of my friends. The key is, what does it mean to be masculine? For me, being masculine when I was in my 20s was working out to be as huge as possible, to be as ripped as possible. I didn't work out to be fit or healthy. I worked out to be monstrous. I also set about in my 20s to try and have sex with as many strange people as humanly possible, and I generally just wanted to be awesome. I went into investment banking. I had no idea what it was, but I thought that was the most awesome job I could have. So to be awesome, have a lot of sex, and to be huge. That's what I thought masculinity meant. I think as you get older, you find that masculinity means different things. Being a loving, responsible head of household, getting involved civically, voting, registering people to vote, being a good neighbor, taking an interest in the well-being of a child that isn't yours. So the vines still are there, they just change. And what I tell young men is the following. Figure out what masculinity is and will mean to you, and try and get to the forward vines as quickly as possible. Or put another way, stop acting like a boy and start acting like a man. What is the definition of rich? Rich is passive income that's greater than your burn.
So a tale of two households. My father and his wife, between their pension from the Royal Navy and Social Security, make $58,000 a year, but they do not have to work for any of it. It's all passive income from dividends, annuities. They spend $50,000 a year. They are rich. I have a lot of friends in New York who make between $3 and $7 million a year between their ex-wife, alimony, and a house in the Hamptons. They spend all of it. They are poor. You want to get to a point through rental income, dividends, investments, annuities, such that your passive income by the time you are 50, 60, or 70 is greater than your burn, which means you also have to think about your burn. So kids just think about their top line income. Adults also focus on their burn. Things versus experiences. The research is clear here. People overestimate the amount of joy they'll get from things and underestimate the amount of joy they'll get from experiences. In sum, take your husband to Africa and drive a Hyundai. A good death and return on investment. There's a lot of discussion around the reward of raising kids. I also think there's a lot of reward in giving someone a good exit. I have personal experience with this. I took 6 months off of NYU and moved into the Summerlin adult active living community to help give my mom a decent exit, and it's, other than my boys, the thing I'm most proud of in my life. Generally speaking, people as part of a family unit are much happier. But the key is family is a definition of the definition of family. Family is people who decide to take an irrational interest in each other's well-being. It can be two friends moving in together to help each other raise their kids. It can be an uncle and a brother and a nephew moving in to try and share costs. But the notion that we're around people and we're pack animals generally results in more happiness. Success is resilience over failure. All of you will know tragedy. All of you will get fired. If you're looking for justice, you will not find it in the corporate world. Some terrible things will happen to you personally. The key to success is your ability to mourn and then to move on. And that is to figure out what is the life or the statute of limitations on what has happened to you. If you get fired, it might be 30 to 60 days before you actually get out there and start trying to find another job. You get divorced, I think it's more like a year. You lose a parent, that's probably 6 months to a year. But recognizing that mourning is a part of healing, and that's okay, and allowing yourself to be upset. But at some point, if you haven't been able to get past it and you're still stuck, it's the willingness to acknowledge you're stuck, and also the courage to reach out to others and ask for help and acknowledge that you're stuck. I think a lot of people my age who are unhappy, you can reverse engineer it to an incident that they never got over where they became stuck. And it can be as small as resentment over something that did or didn't happen at work or a failed relationship. Nothing is ever as good as bad as it seems. Your perception of things in the moment is dramatically increased to the reality of their importance. In 1999, I was looking at jets because I had an e-commerce company and I was told I was going to be a billionaire. But I had the wisdom to go that a bunch of 29-year-olds looking at jets probably is not a healthy part of the economy, and that in fact things will return to normal. And in fact, they returned to normal viciously fast. In 2008, I got run over by the recession. And my accountant called me and said, "You're broke." And my oldest son had the poor judgment to come rotating out of my girlfriend at the exact same time. And I felt very emasculated, and my self-worth as a man was very low. I wasn't nearly as smart as I thought I was in 99, and I wasn't nearly as stupid as I was in 2008. The one piece of advice seniors would give their younger selves is the following. They wish they'd been less hard on themselves. The key to a long-term relationship is forgiveness, but you also have to be forgiving of yourself. When you're staring at the wall because you failed or something bad has happened to you at night, recognize that as you get older, that failure will be less than your disappointment that you were so upset over it, because as time progresses, you're going to realize it just wasn't that big a deal. What can take us off track? One, howling in the money storm, being totally focused on money. That is, in a capitalist society, you have an obligation to be economically viable. Money is a wonderful thing. But at some point, you want to recognize when you get to that level of economic security, what makes me happy? Money is ink in your pen. It can write different chapters. It can make certain chapters burn brighter. But it is not your story. And at some point, you have to decide, what is my story other than the ink in my pen? The delta between action and inaction. Thinking loving things about other people does not make you a loving person. You have to express these things. Men are especially bad at this. We believe that affection and admiration is a currency, and that if we express admiration and affection for other men, we give up a part of ourselves. Women are much better at this. Taking all of the good things you feel and creating them into action or articulating them, that is the most untapped natural resource in the world. Tell your coworkers you admire them. When you find somebody who's doing something that makes you fond of them, articulate that. Be the person you are in your brain. There's so many good thoughts running between our ears and so much fear around our willingness to actually articulate those things. Forgiveness, we talked about this, the importance to long-term relationships. At some point, you and your partner, professionally and personally, will screw up, and you need to bring a certain level of forgiveness to your life, or you will not have very many sustainable long-term relationships. This is the most dangerous metric in the world. And it's the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and it creates this illusion of prosperity in the US and in Europe. All it is a financial metric on the economic well-being of the top 10% of Americans. Spoiler alert, they're doing really well. This is a better metric, and it's life expectancy, which for the first time in American history has declined 3 years in a row, mostly because of opioid overdoses. I believe we have an emerging mental health care crisis in the US as a function of two things. You have your world of work, you have your world of friends, you have your world of kids. Somebody comes off the tracks with one of your kids, and the world literally shrinks to the universe that is that kid. We have an emerging mental health care crisis among our teenagers brought on by two things. The first is concierge or bulldozer parenting, where we're using so many sanitary wipes on our kids' lives, they're not developing their own immunities. And when they face adversity for the first time in their lives, they freak out. It's sort of this princess and the pea syndrome. That coupled with this biomechanically engineered addiction that the folks on the beach have created, such that we not only see a 16-year-old girl, not only sees the party she wasn't invited to, she sees it play out in real time. Boys bully physically and verbally. Girls bully relationally, and we have put nuclear weapons in their hands. As a result, we've seen teen suicide among boys increase 30%. We've seen it increase 70% among young girls in the last decade. What is the leading cause of unhappiness across the cohort that was least happy? The Harvard Grant study, 400 men from the ages of 19 till they died, all died about 80 years later. The number one source of unhappiness across the people in the cohort that were least happy, alcohol. By the way, this is a do as I say, not as I do. I'm a better version of me drunk. Sober, I'm intense and aloof. Drunk, I'm light and happy and charming and affectionate. The number one source of happiness, the best practice, what is the one thing? The depth and number of meaningful relationships you have. At work, do you feel respected and admired? And do you know that people feel respected and admired by you? Amongst your friends, do you get a sense of joy and camaraderie? And just as importantly, do you know they know that you feel camaraderie and joy with them? And in your family, do you feel intense levels of love and support? And again, just as importantly, do you know they know that they sense intense levels of joy and support from you? The number one largest study in the world on longitudinal happiness, a 400-page academic study, has the best opening line of any academic study ever, and it's the following: happiness is love, full stop. I like that! My name is Scott Galloway, I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time.